So hello again, everyone, and welcome to this Open Research Europe in Practice demonstration, focusing on all a librarian needs to know. So today we're going to talk in detail about the Open Research Europe platform, and we're going to have a very in-depth walkthrough of the open review process. And we're going to answer the main questions that people and researchers ask about ORE, and then you will get the opportunity to ask your own questions as well. So before we start, let me just briefly go through some housekeeping notes. As you may have heard, this meeting is being recorded, and we will send the link to the recording to all registered participants shortly after the demonstrations. Our slides are on Zenodo of the presentations that we will have today, and I will share with you the link to the chat box shortly. And if you have any questions during the presentations, you can deposit them in the chat, or you can raise your hand, and then you can speak up and we will address your questions. And if you can, please keep your cameras off during the presentations. But if we have time at the end of this demo for questions and you want to have your camera on, you're invited to do so. So I'd like to present to you our speakers for today. Kelly Woods is the Senior Associate Publisher at F1000, and she's responsible for looking after all the ORE platform together with several different partners, LIBER included. Matthew Ranscombe is a Senior Assistant Editor at F1000, and he's primarily responsible for handling submissions in the humanities and the social sciences. And finally, Joe Kelly is an Associate Editorial Assistant in the peer review team at F1000, and they're here with us today to give us all the information that we need for ORE. So with that, Kelly, the floor is yours.
Excellent. So I will share my screen. Excellent. Okay. I am a little bit unwell today, so if I just mute myself to cough, please do bear with me. I will try to mute myself so I don't deafen any of you, but I apologize if I am not timely enough in doing so. But other than that, I shall crack on. So Open Research Europe launched or went live rather in March of this year by F1000 in collaboration with the European Commission after a public procurement process. The platform aims to offer beneficiaries of Horizon 2020 and now going forwards Horizon Europe an easy, high quality venue to publish their research at no cost and in full compliance, with the Commission's open access policies. So I'm just going to give you a bit of a background into the platform, how it came to be and sort of how it's been doing so far this year. Then I'll hand over to Matt, who's going to walk you through all of we'll do sort of a walkthrough, a life cycle, if you like, of an article when it's submitted to ORE. So I'll give you some context and background, walk you through the submission process, hand over to Matt, who's going to take you through all of the pre-publication checks that we do on the manuscripts. I'll then pass you over to Joe, who will walk you through the peer review process. And then unfortunately for you, you'll come back to me at the end and I'll talk you through a little bit what happens to the articles after peer review. And then hopefully we'll have lots of time left at the end for questions. So how did Open Research Europe sort of come to be? So I mentioned that it was part of a public procurement process. So a few years ago now, the European Commission put out this call for tender because it wanted to launch its own publishing platform for beneficiaries of its Horizon 2020 and then Horizon Europe grants going forward. So that was a 5.8 million euro contract that was signed in March 2020 with F1000, and that lasts for 4 years. F1000 work in collaboration on that contract with the Global Young Academy, LIBER and Eurodoc, and they collaborate with us mostly on helping us with communication and promotion of Open Research Europe as a publication venue. We also partner with OpenAir to help us further with communication and syndication of the platform. And I already mentioned that it went fully live in March of this year, but it was actually opened for submission since November 2020. I think that's wrong. So why did the European Commission actually want to launch this platform? They were really passionate about wanting to lead by example with regards to open science principles in scientific publishing. So they were very certain that they wanted an open peer review platform. They wanted the ability to share research early, to have it available as a preprint, as opposed to behind closed doors during the peer review process. They also wanted the entire process to be transparent and cost effective. So the APCs that we have in place are currently €780 for each of the articles, and these are fully covered by the European Commission, so there's no author-facing fees. And they also wanted to explore different sustainable open access business models for publishing. So taking the costs away from the authors was the main point there, but also in exploring the potential to collaborate with other funders in the future to bring them onto the platform. So why a publishing platform as opposed to a more conventional journal, I guess? So the European Commission were really committed to launching a high quality, reliable and efficient publishing venue for their EU research. They wanted to set high scientific standards within a transparent process, and helped us to put together an expert scientific advisory board that helped to make sure that we're on track with the content that we're publishing. And primarily they wanted no cost to authors or beneficiaries. So as it's a diamond model where the fees are covered by the funder. And they wanted a venue where grantees could publish the work that results from their grants even long after the grants themselves have finished, and one that was fully compliant with all of the OA obligations that form part of the Horizon 2020 and now the Horizon Europe grant agreement. So there are many different OA obligations there, and they wanted to make sure that they were providing a venue that was fully compliant. So what does the platform actually do? So we publish original peer-reviewed articles and preprints that stem from Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe funded research with immediate open access. So all of the content is published with a CC BY or a CC 0 license, so it can be reused and the copyright is retained by the author. We also operate on an open peer review policy, which Joe will talk a lot more about later. That means the reviewers of the identities are made known, the reviews are published, and post-publication commenting is available on the articles as well. And we also wanted to make sure that all the articles could be data mined and were connected to repositories and data repositories and indexes as well. So all of the articles have personal identifiers. We operate on an open data and open software principle, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. And we're working to connect with more and more indexes as the platform grows. Each of the articles also has its own dedicated metrics page where we track things like views and downloads, and we also pull in alt metrics there as well, and citations. And as I mentioned a couple of times already, the whole process is fully transparent. So all of the policies and the publication guidelines for all the different article types that we offer are published on the website for everybody to see. And it does take the burden off of the researchers with regards to meeting all of the EC's principles and policies, so making sure that they're fully compliant with their grant agreements when they're publishing with us. And it does follow in the example of other funders. So F1000 Research has already partnered up a few years ago now, 5 years ago, with the Wellcome Trust to have Wellcome Open Research, and there's a few others as well, including Gates Open Research and HRB in Ireland as well. So to give you a brief overview of the publishing model, Open Research Europe operates on a post-publication peer review model of publishing. This means that the papers are published open access with DOIs as preprints whilst we carry out a peer review process, allowing for very quick publication and public access to the work. Once the paper is deemed to have passed peer review, which will be explained later, that at that point the papers will be sent to indexers and repositories. So we're going to dig into each of these stages in a little bit more detail later. So before I jump into the sort of life cycle of the article, I just wanted to give a bit of an update onto the progress of the platform so far. So since going live in March, we have published 100, I think it's actually 140 articles now, with 51 of those articles passing peer review. We've accumulated more than 9,000 total views on those articles and more than 2,600 downloads. And you can see that the vast majority of papers that are submitted to Open Research Europe and published, are research articles followed by methods articles, but some of our sort of more quirky article types like the data note and the software tool are also creeping up. Authors are taking advantage of our different article types there. At the minute, we're predominantly publishing mostly social sciences and engineering and technology, and we're looking to sort of expand into the other areas as well, in particular with a focus on agriculture and vet, and growing that a little bit to make sure that we're publishing in a way that's proportional to how the funding is being given out from the EC. So we want to make sure that we're really providing a platform that meets the needs of all the researchers in these different communities. Yeah, so that's a little bit of an update for how we're doing so far. So with regards to the submission process, what does that actually look like, and what kind of information do we ask for? So when you go onto the website to actually submit your manuscript, you will be asked first to choose the subject area that your manuscript falls within. And this is from 6 options, and they come from the Frascati ontology manual that the European Commission uses to categorize all of their grants. So the 6 options you have to choose from are natural sciences, social sciences, humanities and the arts, engineering and technology, medical and health sciences, and agriculture and veterinary sciences. And those are the same categories that we use to label all of the papers that are published on the website as well. Once you've selected your chosen subject area, you then connect with your ORCID account. So this ensures that any publication that you have with us is immediately updated onto your ORCID account, and you get credit for anything that you're publishing with us. So the next step is to choose the type of article that you're going to submit. So I mentioned that it was actually, I don't think I did mention, one of the things that the European Commission was really committed to was capturing all types of research output that's coming from the projects that they fund, to ensure that none of the work that they're funding is wasted, if you like. So if there's any work that doesn't make it into that final research article at the end, or it couldn't be squeezed in, maybe this is something that you would publish on your laboratory website or upload to your institutional repository, but it's not actually making it into the scientific literature because there's no article type currently out there that suits its purposes. We're hoping that we'll be able to offer you an article type that does meet that need and will allow you to publish all of the research output that you're generating and make sure that that reaches an audience. In order to do that, and because of the fact that we cover such a wide diversity of subject areas, we do offer a wide variety of article types. So this slide is a little bit confusing, I'm aware of that, but I did really struggle to find a way to sort of display all of this information clearly. So I'm prepared to answer questions on any of this later on, obviously. On the left-hand side of the screen here, you can see these are all of the article types that are available to all of the subject areas within Open Research Europe. So all of the STEM subjects and the social sciences and humanities. And there's sort of standard articles in there like the research article and a methods paper, but we also have the brief report and the software tool article that might be a little bit more niche. In the middle, we then have some article types which are specifically available only to the STEM subjects. So these include case reports and study protocols, and also clinical practice articles, which are specifically relevant for the medical and health fields. Over on the right-hand side here, we've got a few more article types that are specifically available to the social sciences. So again, we've got that study protocol coming in, but here's where you start to see the essays and systematic reviews. And then finally at the bottom, we've got article types that are additionally available to the humanities, which is the essay article at the minute. That's the only extra article type that we're offering. So just to clarify again, on the left-hand side here is these article types are available to all subject areas. And then these are the sort of additional ones that are available to the specific subject areas as well. And there's full information with regards to article guidelines and what these article types actually are and how they're different on the website to really make sure that you're choosing the correct one when you're submitting your manuscript. So once you have decided which article type you're going to submit, you just select that at the top here. And then the rest of the submission form is quite standard, really. Inserting the title of your article, the abstract, and the keywords. You also have the option to write a plain language summary. This is not currently something that we're mandating, but given that the EC really is committed to the sort of citizen science angle and really bringing its research out there to non-technical users or non-professionals, we really would encourage that you do write a plain language summary, and that gets published alongside the article as well, and we can use that to promote your article to citizens rather than researchers and other professionals. Then you have to list all of the authors. So it is a mandate to publish on Open Research Europe that at least one of the authors must be a Horizon 2020 or a Horizon Europe beneficiary. But other than that, you just fill in the details and mark which one is the corresponding author. We also use the credit taxonomy to capture information about the author contributions. So you just tick the box or tick the relevant boxes to tell us what that author actually contributed to that article. Once you're done, you click Save Author, and then you can just add another co-author or a consortium and collective. Once you've added all the authors, they each have their own little box here at the bottom where you can see which one's the corresponding author, and you can also see what the contribution of each of the authors was. So just to make sure that you filled everything in correctly, and you can change the order as well by dragging them up and down. Once you've got the order correct and the contribution, once you've got the order and the author contribution correct, then you can start adding in the affiliations. So when you first load this page, this side of the screen is actually empty, and you can click into add an affiliation, and then you just click on the affiliation and the person and click link, and it will link that affiliation to that author. Do make sure that the order of the authors is correct before you start adding the affiliations, because if you do need to reorder it, you will have to delete them all and come back again. So do make sure that you're going through the stages in order. Finally, so I already mentioned that it is a requirement to publish on ORE that one author at least is funded by Horizon 2020 or Horizon Europe. So at the minute, we only have a box available for you to enter the project ID for your Horizon 2020 grant, because there haven't been any Horizon Europe grants submitted. Haven't been any Horizon Europe grants awarded, or at least not with publications yet. So once that is finalized, we will be updating the website to include that somehow as well. But you just enter in the project ID of your Horizon 2020 funding, and it just confirms that that ID number does match to a project that we have in our database. And you can also add any other funding that you've received on the article as well. After that, it actually comes to uploading the manuscript. So we do accept Word docs or LaTeX files as well. And there's guidelines on our website for how to upload those, and templates that you can use for LaTeX as well. So you just choose the file and update it. We do operate on an open data policy, which I think Matt's going to talk a little bit more about, but you will be asked to confirm that you either have already deposited the data in a repository, or you will provide us with reasons as to why you cannot do that. And you can then upload all of the figures and a covering letter if you wish to do so. Finally, you have to disclose any competing interests. Let us know if you would like to submit your article to a particular gateway. So the gateways on Open Research Europe are related to the program areas of the Horizon 2020 funding. So at the minute we have, excellent science, or the innovation one as well. So just so you can choose which area of the website you would like your article to be hosted on in relation to where the funding actually came from within the Horizon 2020 program areas. If you don't know that, that's not a problem. We can actually identify that for you. So you can just leave a little note to the editorial team here to let us know that you're not sure, and we can always advise on that. And then there's some sort of standard terms and conditions that you need to approve before we can sort of move forward. So making sure that you have authorization to actually submit this article, that all the information that you've provided is correct, that all the co-authors have agreed, that you have the rights, that the article is not currently under consideration or already been published by another publisher elsewhere as well. Because this is a publishing platform, not a repository, so things cannot be published elsewhere. And once you've accepted all of those and clicked submit, at that point it will be sent over to our pre-publications team to conduct their pre-pub checks. So I'll stop sharing my screen and hand over to Matt.
Right, so hopefully everyone can see my screen now. I'm going to take you through the pre-publication process, just to show you the steps that are followed to ensure that a submitted article is suitable for publication and peer review. I'll take you through the initial checks which we perform on submitted articles, then the subsequent pre-publication checks and copy editing, and the things we look out for during these stages. So to put our team in context, when authors submit their papers using our online submission system, the pre-publications team is the first to manage each one. After the initial checks, copy editing and revisions are complete, the papers move on to our production team and then onward to peer review. The pre-publications team is therefore the first stage in the overall editorial process. Because Open Research Europe publishes articles in a wide range of areas, our pre-publications team have a broad range of subject expertise, with teams for the life sciences, physics, humanities and social sciences. This is to ensure that we can apply subject-specific knowledge appropriate to each field. The team are involved in checking each submission from the point the paper is submitted, and these are assigned according to subject expertise. Our team's subject level expertise is crucial when checking the variety of papers submitted on Open Research Europe, as some subject areas require a different perspective or format for the same article type, and therefore require slightly different approaches. So this is just a little screenshot of what an article submission looks like to us in our internal system. So this is the submission page for a published article, but an initial submission looks much the same when it comes in. The page shows us all of the information which an author has provided upon submission, along with the article files which have been uploaded by the author. We also have access to the article notes here, so it's useful to us if authors provide any important information in the notes upon submission, which isn't already covered by the submission form. This is where we access all of the information which is necessary for the initial checks, which we then perform on articles. So it's very important that authors ensure that all of the information they provide is accurate and complete before submitting to avoid delay. So once submitted, our pre-publications team will perform the initial checks, which are checks on authorship criteria, plagiarism, data availability, ethics, consent, the scope of the article and language. We would also check grant information at this point, as Horizon 2020 funding is required for all articles submitted to Open Research Europe. If a grant number has been provided, we check this against our records to ensure that the author's institution matches the institution to which the grant was awarded. All articles submitted to Open Research Europe must be original. The work must not have been published previously or be currently under consideration or review elsewhere. If there is any significant overlap with another paper, this must be cited in the article and mentioned on submission. Our team uses Authenticate to check for plagiarism in articles. So if clear plagiarism is identified, the article will be rejected. Obviously, the amount of plagiarism can vary depending on the study, and if it's deemed mild, the manuscript can proceed to the pre-publication stage, where any sections of mild plagiarism will be noted for the author to resolve. For our open data policy, we check that the original data underlying the results has been included, alongside details of any software used. We also check whether the authors have included a data availability statement, which is required even where there is no data associated with the article. If the authors have stated that the data is available upon request, the team would query this, as our policy states that it must be publicly available. The team also checks if ethical approval is required for the study. If this has not been provided when necessary, the team will query with the authors on whether ethical approval was given. If ethical approval is not required, we need a detailed explanation of the reason for this included in the article. For articles involving patient or participant data and information, authors must ensure that they have written informed consent from all the subjects. If this is not included, the team will query this. Our teams also check that the article is intelligible and written in good English so that it's suitable for peer review, and that its content can be fully assessed by reviewers and readers. If a submission fails this, it will be returned to authors to address the issues, and if they are not resolved, it won't be accepted. So in this slide, I'll just take you through in a bit more detail on data and ethics. These are the two most common queries raised during the initial checks process, which can hold up the acceptance of an article. A data availability statement is required with every article submission. As mentioned, even if there is no data associated with the article, we still require a statement of this fact with the article. I've included an example of a data statement here. As you can see, it includes some brief information about the data upload, along with a description of the data files. We don't host data ourselves, so we ask for all data to be uploaded to a suitable repository. We have a list of recommended repositories on our website, including services such as Zenodo and Figshare, but any are allowed as long as they allow the assigning of data licenses and DOI identifiers to the data, and that the data policies state that the data will be held indefinitely. We accept data uploaded under one of two Creative Commons licenses, which are the same ones as mentioned for articles that we use for articles, which are CC0 1.0 and CC BY 4.0. Both allow the unlimited sharing and adapting of data, but the latter requires attribution. Any identifying data will need to be sufficiently anonymized before uploading to ensure that participants cannot be identified and are completely anonymous. There are a few exceptions to our data sharing policy, which are outlined on our website, mostly revolving around security and confidentiality obligations. But in most cases, we still ask authors to provide readers or reviewers the option to apply for access to the underlying data under author set conditions. We also require ethical approval for all studies which include human participants or data. Human data is defined by us as any data which was produced by humans. So this can be from as simple as the responses to a questionnaire to a more involved laboratory study. As proof of ethical approval, we require all articles to state the name of the institutional review board which approved the study and any approval numbers. If the review board has stated that ethical approval is not required, we will need proof of this statement. We also need confirmation that written informed consent was provided by all participants in the study to ensure that the study subjects were completely aware of the purpose of the study and that their data is likely to be published. Similarly, any studies involving animals will require ethical approval and proof that the relevant guidelines have been followed. If the appropriate ethical approval or consent has not been obtained, it is often not possible to get this after the study is complete. So it's very important that authors make ethical approval a priority for relevant studies to avoid rejection at this stage. So on to pre-publication checks. Once the initial checks are complete and any inquiries or concerns which we have raised have been satisfied, we begin this process. At this stage, we lightly copy edit and perform detailed checks on the content of the article to ensure that our guidelines have been fully adhered to and that the article is in a suitable condition to be sent for typesetting. These checks include whether the relevant grant information has been stated correctly, the quality of the figures and tables, whether the article is structured correctly, if it's the correct article type, if the methods are reproducible, and whether reporting guidelines are necessary, among many others. So this is just an example of a copy edited article. As you can see here, the copy edit we provide is quite light, so we recommend that authors who need a more in-depth copy edit arrange this before submitting. It's mainly concerned with ensuring that the article is consistent and readable, and that the article is structured correctly according to our guidelines for the article type. We will look for any small errors in the text and provide comments where we believe that more information is required. For example, in this example, I've used comments to point out where further underlying data is mentioned, which hasn't yet been provided, and suggestions for possible extended data, which can also be uploaded. Once these checks are completed and we've finished copy editing the article, we send a conditional acceptance email to the author. which links to the edited article and outlines the revisions which need to be made for it to meet our standards. Once the conditional acceptance email is sent, the author will then have some time to revise the article and return the new version of the manuscript to us. We will compare the revised article to the previous version to ensure that the article has been revised sufficiently to meet our standards. If not, we will send out further edited versions of the article, as many as is required until the article is suitable for publication. So once we're satisfied with the manuscript, we fill in the relevant information about the submission on our system and mark it as ready for typesetters. Once the article has been typeset, it is published on our website and the peer review process begins. As you can see from this example here, it currently says reviewer status awaiting peer review. So I'll now pass you over to Joe, who will take you through the peer review process in more detail.
Thanks for that, Matt. I'll just share my screen. Here we go. Everyone should hopefully be able to see that now. Yep, so basically, once it's been through its, the article's been through its pre-publication checks and has been published, it comes to us at the peer review team. I'll give you kind of a brief sort of intro to peer review as a concept, I suppose, and why what we do is quite different to other peer review approaches before taking you through the step-by-step of how peer review works over Research Europe. Peer review, as we all know, is one of the cornerstones of publishing academic research, and any legitimate publisher will always do their best to ensure the article is thoroughly peer reviewed. So the peer review process serves to ensure that the articles are factual, and the methods are sound, and conclusions are justified. And it's undertaken by academic experts as a research commitment. So my role and the role of the wider peer review team is to help facilitate this process while ensuring peer review remains fair, above board, and in line with Open Research Europe's commitments. Transparent. So whilst peer review itself is standard, there's a whole variety of different approaches to peer review, and a number of schools of thought on the best way to ensure that the process is fair to authors and reviewers, and ultimately to readers as well, who are very important, obviously, as the people who are consuming the research and building upon it. And it mostly boils down to two variables: what level of peer review information is made available to readers, and the other factor is whether the process is blinded, and if so, how much. For those of you not aware, blinding in peer review refers to the, who knows whose identity, and can range from triple blinded, where neither editor nor reviewer nor author knows each other's identity until the article is published, or not blinded at all, aka open, which, as the name suggests, Open Research Europe practices. We find that in non-blinded peer review, this approach is very nice and simple. The fact that everyone knows who everyone is. It's also very clear what the decision-making process is in terms of deciding whether or not an article is academically or scientifically valid, as opposed to some more traditional approaches to peer review, where editors might have the final say on publication of articles, and the decision-making process is not always clear to readers, and possibly even not to reviewers and authors. Of course, there are some benefits to blinded peer review that I should acknowledge, or theoretical benefits, which are mostly related to the idea that in blinded peer review, if authors and reviewers are unaware of each other's identities, it's harder for people to be discriminated against because of gender or ethnicity, or out of sort of competitive advantage or things along those lines. Just a very important consideration. But it's worth bearing in mind that studies for traditional blinded peer review show that the blinding sometimes fails, and you can never really 100% rely on anonymity. And the idea of Open Research Europe's approach to post-publication and open peer review is to guarantee that people are held accountable for the comments and suggestions they make in their peer review reports. And the aim is to really produce higher quality, more constructive reports. And hopefully that's something that we achieve. So how do we go about that? As mentioned, we operate a post-publication peer review model. And what will happen is, before an article is published, authors will be asked to suggest 5 potential reviewers for their article, which must be verified before the article will be published. We take this author-led approach because, as discussed previously, Open Research Europe publishes a huge diversity of different article types, and also in a huge range of different disciplines. And ultimately, authors themselves are best situated within these knowledge communities to know what expertise is required to assess their article, and who the people, the likely people in their field are to being the best place to really sort of assess the research that's been done. So whilst we believe that authors will know the best people in their field to review their work, we do have a reviewer finder tool that is available and can be used by authors who are struggling for suggestions. But I would note that this is based on citation data, titles, keywords, and abstracts. And so, in all honesty, it can be a bit of a blunt instrument. And always our first preference will be for the authors to identify the experts in their field. So where the peer review team comes in first is verifying the quality of these reviewer suggestions. So your first 5 reviewer suggestions before publication, we undertake a series of checks to make sure that the reviewers have the requisite expertise, whether there's any kind of conflict of interest or recent collaborations with the authors that might disbar them from reviewing, because it would be hard to make an argument that a frequent collaborator would be able to assess the work impartially. And basically to make sure that everything is above board. We also check to ensure that any email addresses that were provided with by an author when suggesting reviewer do in fact relate to that reviewer, can be found on their faculty profile page or linked to any academic papers that they've been published. In line with our commitment to full transparency, we do ensure that reviewers give a very robust COI statement, conflict of interest statement, where necessary. That might be to do with being part of a larger research group, but not working that closely with a specific author, for example. And it's worth noting if early career researchers or graduate students maybe don't quite fit the first 2 criteria there of qualified and expert, we do encourage them to co-review alongside a supervisor or principal investigator or any more senior relevant academic, allowing them to train as peer reviewers whilst receiving credit for their scholarly labour and avoiding the practice of ghostwriting peer review reports that recent studies have shown quite common in other models of peer review. This commitment to diverse and global reviewers that you see at the bottom also is aimed at helping ensuring that all research published on ORE is open to scrutiny of the international and wider research community. And where possible, we avoid having 2 reviewers who are situated in the same country reviewing one paper. So once all that's signed off, we send out the invitation to a review. And at that point, basically the role of the peer review team is to act as a mediator between the author and the peer reviewers. So we keep the authors updated about their article every step of the way, and also kind of keep in touch with the peer reviewers who, once they've accepted an article, are given automatically a 2-week deadline to submit the review, but that's often up for discussion. Obviously, we're working with busy academics here, and we can be quite flexible about these review times as long as they keep in touch with us. It's important that we act as the intermediaries because we don't really want reviewers and authors in contact with one another, as again, that might affect the impartiality and transparency of the peer review process. Each reviewer agrees to review who submits a report, which can give one of 3 statuses that you can see here on the left, and I'll explain a bit more in detail in a bit. And ideally, they supply a report that details both the strengths and weakness of the article, and that they answer some mandatory questions, which I'll give you an example of in a bit. Once a report is submitted, our peer review team also make sure that it passes a kind of editorial check in terms of quality, make sure the reviewers have read the entire article, have engaged with its arguments, and meet our reviewer code of conduct, which can be found on the ORE website. And similar to the pre-publication process, we also undertake a light copy edit, mostly aimed at fixing any spellings and grammar issues and making sure the report is intelligible, whilst maintaining kind of the intellectual arguments made by reviewers. So what responsibilities do we ask our reviewers to fulfill, and what are we looking for to get out of the peer review process? So we aim to get 2 reports per article, ideally, as I said, from different countries, so that with multiple perspectives on the work. And there are 3 approval statuses that a reviewer can choose, which determine the outcome of the peer review. An approved status means that there are very minor revisions needed, and on the whole, the article is valid, ready to go, or maybe no revisions are needed at all. An approved with reservations is chosen when the article requires maybe a small number of changes, or occasionally more significant revisions, but generally the sort of scientific or academic argument being made throughout the article is valid. The results are all above board, and just like some tweaks need to be made, I guess. And not approved means the article is not valid and requires crucial and substantial revisions to be made. And so in order to pass peer review, each article requires either 2 approved reports or 1 approved and 2 approved with reservations. And that's kind of the bar that we consider to have been passing peer review. In cases where an article hasn't passed peer review, we'll get onto maybe a bit of an example of this in a bit, And even in cases where it has, we always encourage authors to revise their article to address the comments that both reviewers have made. And this is part of really the whole point of the open peer review process. It allows a discussion between author and reviewer that can also benefit the wider scientific community or research community, and it's all available on Open Research Europe. How do we ensure that a reviewer meets these standards? Again, that's the job of the peer review team. So when a reviewer comes to submit a report on Open Research Europe, this is what they'll see. On your left here, this is part of the form where they can see which version of the article they're reviewing, give a certain report status, declare any conflict of interest, and write the text of the review. This is also where they give us permission to publish the report with a CC BY license. And so that's as in line with all other things published on Open Research Europe that is sort of citable and reproducible. They also have to answer all of the following questions before a report will be published. Each of these questions are tailored to the specific article type. Obviously, you're going to assess a research article in a very different way to how you would assess a software tool. And they allow us basically to serve as a double purpose of letting reviewers know what a good report will comment on and what we expect from a peer review report to engage with, but also make sure that authors are being fairly assessed on an article of its specific merits rather than questions such as novelty, and also, as I say, that the reviewers' kind of comments reflect the type of article that has been published. Reviewers for doing this work and working with us and writing sort of publishable reports are given credit for the time and effort they have contributed as we publish their name and affiliation alongside the report. And you can see an example of this here, which will appear on the right-hand side next to the article. There's like sort of link to it. We believe that this not only improves the quality of reports, but also allows for some accountability, ensuring that the names of the people providing this service are available to our readers. It's also a great way for new peer reviewers or people who are interested in the peer review process to see what goes into a peer review report and what good kind of like holding people to scholarly accountability looks like. All of our peer review reports are also given a unique DOI and are citable in themselves, so they are real scholarly contributions and objects. So as I say, this is what an article that has been through the peer review process on Open Research Europe looks like. And we can see here the process in action. Originally, this article received 2 approved with reservations. The authors went back, revised the article, and then on the publication of the second version, it receives 2 approves and has passed peer review. And this is always going to be reflected in the title of the article, which will tell you which version it is and how many peer review reports it has had and what status it received. And this is also included in the citation of the article. And that's how we make clear what the peer review status is. Articles can, in theory, go through many revisions, and all the revisions are available online so that anyone can see the evolution of the article, as well as the peer review reports that have helped in improving it. And this makes these articles living, as there's always an opportunity to submit a new version, and this process is fully transparent. Ideally, when you receive a peer review report, which is what you see on the left here, you will then, as an author, write a point-by-point response to the report, which can be seen publicly to let the reviewers and readers know what changes they've made to the article, and also maybe to like sort of restate some of the arguments to clarifications to be made. Once a revised version has been published, we as a peer review team then invite the original reviewers to assess whether the article has been improved based on their comments. And in this case, we're looking perhaps often for less in-depth reports, and they're okay to just kind of like sign them off if the comments have been answered. But again, they can still have queries or questions, and that can lead to further versions. They can also update at this point the status that they're awarding the article, and it's possible for the an article that has previously not passed peer review due to approved reservations or even not approved to, through the work of an author, eventually pass peer review. At this point, with over 50 articles having completed peer review or been indexed in Open Research Europe, it currently takes about a median 22 days to receive your first peer review report and a median 44 days to receive the second peer review report. And in total, and this is including papers where things have had to be revised, a median 80.5 days to pass peer review. These are very ballparky numbers, and please bear in mind that for individual papers, these numbers will vary a great deal due to a variety of factors. Obviously, different disciplines peer review in different ways, and your reviewers might be busy or things along those lines. But I thought I'd give a sense of how this kind of process plays out. Ultimately, the overall goal at Open Research Europe is to ensure that peer review occurs openly so that readers can see the decision-making process in action, and that peer review validates and improves the article, ultimately, hopefully meaning that peer review happens in a fair and ethical manner. Yeah, I think that's all I had to say, so I will pass back to Callie. Once I figure out how to stop sharing my screen. There we go.
Thanks, Joe. So my final slide really was just to sum up and highlight, why is it not, there we go, what are the main benefits of publishing with Open Research Europe. So it's pretty quick in comparison to other more traditional publishing models. The articles, if they're pretty perfect when submitted, can be published as rapidly as a week, but it is taking us currently, well, 7 days to review all the articles that are submitted and get feedback back for the authors for them to then revise them. But yeah, they can be published as a preprint in as little as a week. I mentioned already that we're trying to be really inclusive and make sure that we can publish all types of research outputs with our wide variety of article types. And we do take the administrative burden away from the authors by making sure that we're fully compliant with all of the European Commission's open access and data sharing requirements. We do hope that we're doing something to combat the reproducibility and replicability crisis by ensuring that all of the data is published and deposited alongside the article, and we are fully transparent. So we operate on an open peer review, open data, and a very author-driven led model of peer review. And then finally, obviously, the costs are met directly by the Commission, so authors don't need to worry about sourcing funding to meet the article processing charges. So now I think I'll stop sharing my screen and we can address any of the questions that you had. So let me have a quick look. So I think the first question that I saw was about the choosing the subject discipline right at the beginning of the submission process, and why is that necessary and how does that work for sort of interdisciplinary research? The main reason that we have to choose one subject area at the beginning is really for our article guidelines and the article types that are available within the different disciplines. So I mentioned that some of the disciplines have very specific article types, and so that's one of the reasons why. And also for reporting purposes, so that we can see how many submissions we're receiving in each of the subject areas. I will point out, though, that it is possible to have your article tagged with multiple subject areas later on in the process. Joe is nodding. I'm not sure if that actually happens during pre-publication or peer review or a little bit of both, but yeah, you can have multiple subject discipline tagged on your articles. Can one of you confirm when that actually happens?
Yeah, we do that in the pre-publication stage.
Excellent. So if you did want it to be tagged with another tag, you can leave that in the notes for the editorial team, and they'll make sure that they will get that added so we can really highlight the interdisciplinary nature of the work. The next question was about the credit system. So if we use the credit system, why is it still important to list the authors in a particular order? And Adam, I think it was, is suggesting that this undermines the idea of the contribution data as the primary mode of attribution of role that credit was designed to solve. Yeah, that's a really interesting point. We do mandate that you have to provide at least one author role for every author that you list on the paper, but you do still have the option to rank them however you see fit. If you would like to do that alphabetically, you can. If you would like to do it according to perceived contribution to the article, you can also do that. I do agree that this does somewhat undermine the problem that credit was supposed to solve, but I think realistically, if you look at the publishing industry at the minute, the first and last author is still something that is very widely used, and so to completely remove that ability from the authors might be too restrictive and prevent them from wanting to actually publish on the platform. But it's definitely a discussion that yeah, I'm interested to have, and if we would like to see us commit more fully to that, that's a conversation that we can have. So feel free to unmute yourself. Miriam, I think that you've had your hand raised for a while. Is that on purpose, or Miriam Qatar?
Yes, no, my hands was not raised, but
Oh,
anyway.
Zoom is very weird. It's showing me that you've had your hand raised like the whole time. So
Oh, sorry.
no worries at all.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got, apologize for the terrible pronunciation of everybody's names as well. Pascal Poplin, who's asking, do all articles in Open Research Europe pass through peer review? Joe, do you want to step in for this one?
Yeah, I guess in terms of everything published on Open Research Europe will go through or all of the articles, like sort of article types outlined today, will go through the peer review process, but not necessarily everything will pass peer review, I suppose is what I would say to that. So we will always try to find reviewers for articles, and authors will always given be the who have received 2 peer review reports, but might not have received 2 approved, or haven't met the threshold of like passing peer review that are set out, will always be invited to revise their paper, at which point they do have a chance to then be re-reviewed and have the chance of passing peer review. But obviously, at that point, it's totally up to the authors whether they want to undertake that work, whether they've got the time to do so. So everything will go through the peer review process, but not everything will. It's up to the authors and what they do, I suppose, as to whether everything passes peer review. I mean, theoretically, everything could. But obviously, some research is going to need a lot more work and need to go through a lot more versions potentially than others. I hope that makes sense in terms of answering that.
Yeah, I think it makes perfect sense. Do follow up if you have any other questions relating to that. But yeah, basically the authors do have the option to continue to revise that paper in response to any reviews that they receive, and to get that paper to the point of passing peer review. But no, it's not guaranteed that all articles are going to pass peer review. That's not something that we could state.
Yeah, and I think it's important that research that doesn't meet that standard, like, you know, sort of that the whole point is like we openly say, and we have reviewers openly like sort of make clear when research falls below a certain standard, it's then on the authors to address those concerns.
Yeah, I don't know if we have any stats, Matt, on the number of papers that pass the pre-publication checks, or the sort of rejections that we're doing at that stage, if that falls within part of this question as well.
I don't have any stats off the top of my head, but I'd say the majority do make it through the initial checks process and onto pre-publication checks. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I suppose it's the thing where it's quite high standard research that is being funded by like Horizon 2020 stuff and stuff like that, so that perhaps helps with that.
Yeah, I think we had a bit of a higher sort of rejection rate, if you like, at the very beginning of the platform, with a big misconception that it was a repository that people could put papers that were already published somewhere else. But I think that we've kind of overcome that now, and now we're getting the original work submitted. So yeah, most of the stuff should be passing the pre-publication checks now. David Kane is asking if the articles show up in citation indexes. I'm assuming you mean sort of like Scopus and Web of Science there. Because the platform is so new, so it's only been live since March, you do have to publish a certain amount of content and or be publishing for a certain amount of time in order to get into these sorts of databases and indexes. So we're not currently in very many places at all. We've just been accepted into the directory of open access journals, and we do send all of our content that has passed peer review to Zenodo and then onto OpenAir as well. But we are in the process of applying to all these different indexes to get open research in there as quickly as we can. But these things do take time. You have to accrue a certain amount of content. And specifically for subject-specific databases, you have to accrue a certain amount of content in that area as well before you can get into these indexes. So that's a work in progress. Authors who do not have the European project support, can they also publish? At the minute, no. We're only open for submissions for papers that have come as a result of funding from Horizon 2020 or going forward to Horizon Europe. We are in discussions with the European Commission. They are interested in extending the platform out and collaborating with other European funders to make it a little bit more open to that and to other people. But that is not something that's going to happen during the current framework agreement. So we have the contract with the European Commission for the next 4 years, and that's not something that we're going to be able to do under this current framework. Potentially when the contract renews, if it renews, or whatever will happen at the end of the 4-year period, that is something that we're discussing with them to include as part of the next framework agreement. Is there anything in place to facilitate access to the research for readers with languages other than English? Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. Currently, we only publish in English, and so we're indexing mostly in the English databases and repositories as well. It was something that the European Commission were interested in, to have the website translated into other European languages as well, and we are looking to get the sort of how it works page with the breakdown of the publication model and how that works, translated into different languages to make that more easily understandable, but we cannot currently publish in other languages or have other languages of the articles available on the website at the minute. I may have missed this, but is a DOI minted for each thing that is published? So each of the published articles will receive an individual DOI as soon as they're published as a preprint, and they can start being cited from that point as well. All of the peer review reports that are published as well also get a DOI, and they are also fully citable. The different versions also have different DOIs, right? Yeah, so you can cite the different versions independently as well, and that's donated in the sort of an extension of the DOI. But yes, they do all have registered DOIs and are fully citable independently. Could I include articles published first here in an overlay journal? No. This is a publishing venue, so anything that is published here cannot be under consideration at any other journal, and the same is true if you were to submit this to another journal. It wouldn't be able to be under consideration at any other publishing platform like us, so there's not that option. Wolf Schroeder is asking, have I understood it correctly that it is not sure if the platform will continue after the 4 years contract? Excuse me. No, I should have been more clear there. So F1000 Research has a contract with the European Commission that lasts for 4 years. After that point, Open Research Europe will continue, but it is not known whether the collaboration between the European Commission and F1000 will continue. So under the call for tender that was put out, the contract has to be, the whole project really has to be put back out for tender every 4 years to ensure that the Commission is utilising the public money in the best way and that they're getting exactly what they want from the process. So at the end of this 4-year period, it might go back out to tender and somebody else other than F1000 might win that tender. But Open Research Europe will still definitely continue in some way. The content will not be lost, and it does form part of the contract that we currently have with them, with the European Commission, to ensure the sustainability of the platform even in the event that it does not continue with us. So if we were to have to pass over to another publisher or another I don't know, group of people that are going to run the project on going forwards, we would have to provide all of the guidelines and documentation as to how we've been running it, so that they could sort of pick up exactly where we left off and there would be no disruption in the service to authors or readers. David, you have your hand raised. Did you want to?
Hi, Kelly. Yes,
Hi.
I do. I just wanted to return to the overlay journal thing, and just to be clear, my understanding of an overlay journal is that it explicitly publishes material that has been published elsewhere that is open access. So I was wondering whether you could just double check that for me. I'm involved in the creation of an overlay journal in a European project, and I would appreciate if you could just double check that. I feel sure that you might be able to do that. it does acknowledge the original source of the article. I might pass my email on to you.
Okay, yeah, sorry if I'm getting it wrong there. Yeah, I'll 100% look into that and follow up with you to make sure I can get the correct answer, and we'll circulate it to everybody else as well, just in case.
I'm sure it's fine. But... yeah, I just want to double check that. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely, we can double check that. Did anybody else have any other questions that they wanted to raise, or shall we sign off there? Miriam, now you're clapping. Did you mean to do that? Or I think we'll leave it there then. So thank you so much, everybody, for attending today and for all your excellent questions. I hope we were able to give you a bit more of an in-depth run through of the platform and the life cycle of an article. I think all of our email, were our email addresses on the slides? Maybe they weren't, you know. I don't think they were. Okay, what I'll do is I'll definitely send my email. Athena's got it anyway, but we'll send that round to you as well, just in case you do have any additional questions, or if you would like us to come and give a presentation at your university, or your research institution, that's also something that we are interested in doing. So yeah, I will pass my contact details on to you, and yeah, please feel free to get in touch if you have any other questions or queries. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming today. Thank you to Matt and Joe for helping me with the presentation as well, and providing their expert knowledge in their areas, and for LIBER for putting the webinar together. And yeah, have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.